Are we at war? Is humanity being enslaved and molded into perfectly controlled societies? Well, according to an anonymous manual found by mistake in 1986, yes, we are. The manual describes a plan and method of quiet war being carried out against the people by an unnamed elite group, perfected after World War II, and that's important, the purpose of which is to enslave humanity. Why should we care about a manual written so long ago? Because what I see playing out in the world today could only have happened if they implemented what is described. And if we understand their playbook, maybe we can find our way through this. They wanted to be able to analyze and control the entire United States, knowing that this would include slavery and genocide. Have you noticed any of that going on lately? And now we can see they've since taken the principles and applied them to the entire world. Now, the main factor holding it back in the 1950s was the capacity for computing power to crunch the massive amounts of data needed to control a society. Now, of course, that's no problem, which may explain why we see their plans speeding up. In this video, I'm going to give a brief summary of the manual, and in a follow-up video, give my thoughts on what we can do about this. Now, in the plan, there is no room for morals or cultural values. Human society is looked at with cold objectivity. If you are not part of the elite group, you're regarded as livestock to be used. Why? Well, they use the law of natural selection, saying that if people will not use their intelligence, they are no better than animals, which justifies treating them as such, and claiming it is by their choice and consent. Now, is this our first clue into the minds of the global elite, perhaps, and how they justify killing off millions? In the interest of world order, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the public, with the purpose of shifting the wealth of what they considered the undisciplined and irresponsible masses into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. To do this, they realized they needed to establish an economy which is totally predictable and manipulatable. If they succeeded, and they did, it makes an absolute joke of the idea of a free market economy, stock markets, the oil price, and everything, doesn't it? They call it biological warfare because it attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of people. Think about that in the context of COVID-19. I was chatting to some older people on the weekend, and they were saying how the lockdowns did exactly that and actually robbed them of all desire to leave their homes and start engaging with people again. Vitality, options, and mobility. Are we already slaves without realizing it? Okay, so in order to do this, they needed to know everything people owned, all their wealth as well as their strengths and weaknesses, and I'm talking physical, mental, and emotional, and then attack these in subtle ways so that a nation doesn't even know it's being attacked. People may feel something is wrong, but they can't even describe it, so they don't talk about it or get together to do something about it. And if the attack is done gradually enough, people adapt to it and learn to tolerate its quiet takeover of their lives. So the idea is to keep applying pressure until a nation cracks. This pressure is psychological, but applied using the economy, i.e. mess with it, cause instability, create poverty, and make people afraid because they never know what's coming next. You can already see the psychology at play, right? And they absolutely knew that this would cause physical, mental, and emotional damage to people. And by cracking, I mean that the people are ready to accept a state of total control or slavery. Now you can see that this would require an enormous amount of data gathering and processing. Not so easy in the 50s, but they started it by all sorts of means, including garbage analysis, I kid you not, but also telephone taps, surveillance of children in school, the tax system, etc. And up front, they realized that they needed to get the lower class completely under control, and that the best way to do this is by disintegrating the family unit. Wow, what? How do you do this? Firstly, by keeping the parents more and more preoccupied. And if we look at the levels of preoccupation in society today, I guess they've won on that one. And secondly, compulsory government-operated daycare centers for children. And obviously, since then, they've added many more weapons to that arsenal. Like, look at the divorce rate, the mainstreaming of LGBTQ, sex education in primary schools, etc., etc. Okay, so that's disintegrating the family unit. Then, they need to keep the lower classes uneducated and done by providing the lowest possible quality of education. So they won't even see what a gap there is and certainly never be able to break out of it. It kind of reminds me of The Truman Show. Remember that movie where he didn't even know and couldn't see that he was living life on a TV set? And then 3 is the money system. Now, I'm sure you know that money or cash is a fiction, that it's based on debt, so I won't go into that to save time. There's lots of videos out there on this. I'll just give a quick summary on how a debt-based money system enabled them to grab our wealth. So firstly, if a currency isn't backed by real wealth, they can manipulate it at will. They can cause inflation, recessions, play the value against the exchange rate, put all the house prices up like they did in the mid-2000s to get rid of young first-time homeowners, do anything they like. And this lowers the value of the currency. Here's an example. The townhouse I bought in 2000 cost me half of what a VW T-Cross costs right now, which is a 1.5-litre engine car. All right, then secondly, they got us to use easy credit. So to borrow money against our future labor to pay for stuff now. Not only do we create that money through borrowing it and then pay interest on it, but, and here's the real trick that we often miss, if they could control the economy, they can easily create situations where we can't pay back, like raising interest rates, causing losses of jobs, etc. Then they grab the real assets backing the debt. For example, they take your house to pay off the mortgage. And if the resale value of the asset doesn't cover the debt, which again they easily control, as we've seen in South Africa with house auctions and insider tradings by the banks, they even take your other property and possessions to cover it. Finally, so much debt is created, they need to balance it, i.e. get rid of it. How do they do that? Well, the creditors, that is, the people to whom the real debt is owed, that would be us because they've stolen it from us, need to be balanced out of the equation, just like balancing books, and it's literally how they see it. How do they balance us out of the equation? By creating wars to kill us off. Seriously, that's the modus operandi. Or I would suggest, if not a war, then something else like a plague or the medicine to prevent the plague that ultimately ends up killing people. I believe that's why they're killing us off, not to protect the planet or because there are too many human beings, but to balance their books. Now, if you've ever had a feeling of absolute confusion about simple everyday things, like why the prices in the shops keep going up and up, and all of them at the same time, why there's no difference anymore between prices at Checkers and Pick and Pay and the Spar, why are there even only 3 or 4 places that you can even buy groceries anymore? Or why are the malls filled with the same chain stores and no private boutiques or shops anymore? Why the prices on some items go up hugely but less on others? Yes, maybe it's because some are imported and others are made locally, but even this doesn't make sense. For example, since COVID, our rand has been more or less stable at around 20 rand to the dollar. And yet, you now pay 66 rand for a slab of Lindt chocolate that you were paying 45 rand for before. And everything else has gone up too, and keeps going up every month, local and imported. It all feels controlled, right? Well, if this manual is correct, it absolutely is all controlled, and all for a purpose. So let's look at that a bit deeper. Okay, let's go back to the 1950s when this was all being tested. They didn't have the data gathering or crunching abilities that have subsequently been built into the system. So they took a model from aviation called shock testing. This is where they would apply a vibration to, for example, a projectile to see the point at which it would shatter. So they applied this to the economy by shocking the price of a random commodity and then monitoring consumer reaction. They would analyze the data from this to look for especially psychological effects, because that is how they could ultimately control us, right? And yes, shock testing did end up, of course, showing a direct relationship between the availability of money and people's psychological outlook. And then they tested and measured what economic shakeups would cause the public to run from their problems or escape from reality through alcohol, drugs, entertainment, religion, etc. And from this, they figured the most probable combination of shocks which would enable complete control of the public. So things like 911 spring to mind, but to use a random made-up example from the 1950s when they were testing this, putting up the price of meat might make people buy less meat, but it might also get men to spend more time in the pub and drink more because they are now under pressure from their wives to earn more. Their plan was to get so good at this that the response of households to future shocks could be predicted and, of course, manipulated, which, of course, they did. And to quote the manual, and so society becomes a well-regulated animal with its reins under the control of a sophisticated, computer-regulated, social energy bookkeeping system. Well, that sure made me consider the pandemic in a new light. The shutting down of the entire world economy in the space of a couple of weeks. I'd call that pretty much complete control, wouldn't you? Was it just another shock test? What's coming next? Well, we already know that actually. Now, as technology progressed, they were able to refine this even more. The first layer of data was to put barcodes on products, or UPCs, Universal Product Codes, as they're also known. So now they can see exactly what is being bought. Yes, I'm sure it helped with stock control, but why was every business forced to use their system? Did you know that if you want to launch a retail product now in South Africa, you have to register and buy a barcode? You can't use your own, and it's not even specific to Checkers or Woolworths or whatever. It really is universal. Now we know why. Then, the next layer of data was to be able to tie products back to individuals, because then they could know absolutely everything about every individual. This they did through the use of credit and debit cards and itemized billing. This is not me making this up. It's in the manual, which you can go and read for yourself. It actually says, first buy a credit card and then buy an individual tattooed body number. I guess at that stage they hadn't thought of technology. They could just put a chip under your skin. Now, not only the price of commodities could be used as a shock test, but the availability of labor as well, especially in critical service areas like transport, communication, public utilities like water and electricity. Are those labor strikes really run by the laborers then, after all, or fomented by those who control the system? Okay, so why is this a big deal? Why does it matter if someone knows everything about us, what we spend our money on, or that we are forced to buy in the same chain stores around the country, the same supermarkets, and that there are no small businesses left? There are many reasons for that, but I'm just going to focus on one small part. In order to gain a monopoly over a free market, the more they know about every aspect of it, the easier it would be to get control. This is highly complex, by the way, which is why it was only as technology progressed that they were able to gain more control. All right, so here's a silly example I made up to try and explain. Okay, let's say they want to enforce a type of fashion on the youth, for example, to break down morality. Remember, breaking down the family unit is key to control. So let's say they want young girls to wear really short skirts, for example. If we just think about all the aspects that go into that, from advertising to design to manufacturing to distribution, of course they want all the shops to carry the same fashion, to limit young girls' choice and force them to wear that fashion, and of course so that they fit in with their peers, etc. But if they control all these shops, it becomes easy. And just like that, without realizing, we are dancing to their tune. Okay, let's just take a deep breath for a minute. Pretty appalling, isn't it? Are things starting to make a bit more sense to you though, like they did to me? Let's keep digging. Okay, so the ultimate control would be to be able to change the economy at their whim, or even to destroy it, because that will convince the public that certain experts should take control of the money system, who will of course promise security. This security will always come at the price of liberty or freedom and justice. And when citizens aren't able to control their financial affairs, they are totally enslaved. In those days, they used shock testing. Now they have the data at their fingertips. The manual lists every aspect of society that came under their control. Here are just some of the more interesting ones. Legal functions. Wonder why our legal system is so corrupt. Material available for TV viewing. Surveillance. Puts a new light on the cameras everywhere, doesn't it? Apparently for crime fighting and safety. The storage of information. And you thought all your stuff is private on the cloud. To develop psychological analyses and profiles of individuals. Yes, that's including you. Oh, and me. Is the world as it is starting to make more sense to you? And can you see how much easier it is today with Google and Siri and Alexa and all of the stuff we put online all the time? How did they do this? It is so diabolical. How did they get away with it? Now, they knew, of course, that the public must not know about this plan. 3 things determined how long they could keep us ignorant: control of the media, subverting education, and keeping the public distracted with unimportant stuff. Now we get to their primary numero uno strategy: diversion. The simplest method of gaining control of the public is to keep them undisciplined and ignorant of the basic principles of the system. Of course, they would never want us to know what's really going on, right? And to keep them confused, disorganized, and distracted with matters of no real importance, as they term it. This is achieved in a number of ways, and I'm going to go through the list because it's really, really interesting. Disengaging their minds, think endless scrolling. Sabotaging their mental activities, endless scrolling again, dumb education, and a host of other things. Providing a low-quality education in mathematics, logic, systems design, and economics. Now, because we've never taught this stuff, most of us find the terms they use in big finance and economy so confusing that our brains just shut down. So they keep us ignorant and believing that we could never understand. So we don't even try. Well, at least that's my experience. Discouraging technical creativity makes us think we could never design or build anything, which leads to helplessness. Engaging their emotions. Notice how everything these days is emotionalized. I'm thinking Greta Thunberg, the LGBTQ movement. When emotions are engaged, logic goes out the window, just saying. Increasing their self-indulgence and indulgence in emotional and physical activities by, sorry, that's long, but bear with me, relentless mental and emotional rape by way of a constant barrage of sex, violence, and wars in the media. Isn't that gross? And pretty obvious. For example, think how embarrassing it would be to watch a modern movie with your gran as a comparison to how bad things have gotten. Giving them what they desire in excess, what they call junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. So here I'm thinking information overload, but never about the important things. Rewriting history and law, that's real scary. And an interesting one, forcing deviant and absurd social and sexual behavior into society, which distracts people to what the Kardashians are doing, for example, or The Bold and the Beautiful, or any of those ridiculous soapies, rather than thinking about their own and their children's real needs. The general rule, the more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer solutions. It's listed in the manual. But we've heard this before, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Okay, so here's a summary of how they keep us diverted. Media, keep the adult public attention away from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Schools, keep the public ignorant of real mathematics, real economics, real law, and real history. Entertainment, keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. I think that's about 12 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And work, keep the public busy, 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 with no time to think. Okay, there was a whole lot more, but that's the briefest I could keep this. How would they know when they've won? And how do we know? When the government is still able to collect tax and seize private property without fair compensation. Or to put it another way, they simply calculate how many people keep paying income tax despite no services supplied by the government. Why do we do it? The conclusion of the manual is, this form of slavery is essential to maintain social order and tranquility for the ruling upper class. Sure, if that didn't shock you to the core of your being like it did me, well, I don't know. The question to ask now is there anything we can do about this diabolical plan? I will cover that, plus a few other key things from the manual in a second video. Please look out for that. Signing off as Trinity, I'll see you soon, and much love to you.